Imagine a packed courtroom on a gray winter morning in Cleveland, Ohio. The kind of day when the chill outside creeps into your bones, and the quiet murmur of waiting families blends with the rustle of legal papers. At the front sits Judge Harold Simmons, an old man with tired eyes ready to wrap up another routine hearing. But today wouldn't be routine. Not after what was about to happen. Just as the judge reached for his gavel, a small, trembling voice rose from the gallery. Everyone turned. There, gripping the wooden bench with tiny hands, stood 6-year-old Marcus Green. His Spider-Man backpack slipped down his shoulder as he slowly pointed his finger straight at the witness stand. The entire room fell silent. You could hear the humming of the old fluorescent lights above. "Hez lying," Marcus whispered, his voice shaking but clear. All eyes snapped to Officer Donald Briggs, the tall white police officer in uniform who was testifying. The words hung in the stale courtroom air like smoke from a blown-out candle. Gasp after gasp echoed off the wood-paneled walls. Even Judge Simmons leaned forward, eyebrows raised. Marcus stood there, legs quivering in his worn sneakers, but his gaze was unwavering. In that moment, the courtroom didn't see a child. They saw a witness with courage that most adults never find. And though no one knew it yet, his simple words would begin to unravel a web of lies, shaking the foundations of justice that day. The tension in the courtroom deepened, as if everyone collectively forgot to breathe. Judge Simmons cleared his throat, his gravelly voice cutting through the stunned silence. "Bailiff, bring the boy forward." The uniformed officer gently guided Marcus past rows of spectators, their eyes wide with disbelief and curiosity. As Marcus climbed onto the towering witness chair, his small legs dangled above the polished floor, his shoes swinging nervously. Judge Simmons peered down at him over thin glasses. "Do you know what it means to tell the truth, son?" he asked softly. Marcus nodded, swallowing hard. His tiny hand rested atop the Bible as he swore his oath. In that instant, the courtroom no longer saw Marcus as a fragile little boy. They saw a torchbearer for truth. Officer Donald Briggs shifted uncomfortably on the stand, his confidence flickering like a candle in wind. Across the room sat Marcus' mother, Denise Green, her wrists trembling in her lap. She had been silent through the trial, her dark brown eyes filled with quiet despair. The prosecution had painted her as a dangerous, aggressive woman who resisted arrest and endangered a police officer. But Marcus remembered everything. He inhaled shakily, his voice small but piercing. "Officer Briggs pulled my mom out of the car. She wasn't yelling. She was crying. He called her crazy and pushed her face on the ground." Murmurs rippled through the room, disbelief mixing with dawning horror. Marcus glanced down at his clenched fists. "He saw me recording on Mommy's phone and took it. He said nobody would believe me." At that moment, Officer Briggs' face drained of color, and Denise covered her mouth in shock. The truth was beginning to crack the courtroom's walls of prejudice and routine injustice, and Marcus Green, with trembling lips and tear-filled eyes, was holding the hammer. The entire courtroom sat frozen, as if no one dared to move for fear of shattering the fragile moment Marcus Green had created with his words. Judge Simmons leaned back in his chair, exhaling slowly, his lined face shadowed by the overhead lights. Officer Briggs shifted again, his polished shoes scraping against the tiled floor. For the first time since the trial began, his confident facade cracked. Beads of sweat formed at his hairline. The prosecutor, a stern woman named Linda Carpenter, shot to her feet, her voice sharp with panic. "Objection, Your Honor. This boy is a minor. He wasn't on the witness list." But Judge Simmons raised his gavel slightly, his gaze unwavering. "We're already here, Ms. Carpenter. Let the boy speak." His voice was low but firm, carrying an authority that silenced any further argument. Marcus drew in a shaky breath, his chest rising beneath his faded superhero t-shirt. He looked directly at Officer Briggs, his wide brown eyes glistening with unshed tears. He crushed Mommy's phone. Marcus continued, his voice barely above a whisper, but echoing like thunder in that silent room. Then he threw it in the grass. Denise Green sat behind him, her hands clasped tightly over her mouth, tears streaming down her cheeks. All this time she had felt voiceless, buried under the weight of the prosecution's lies, dismissed as just another angry black woman. But now her son, her brave, trembling little boy, was breathing life back into her truth. Around them, jurors shifted in their seats, some blinking rapidly to hold back tears. In that single moment, as Marcus spoke with childlike honesty and trembling dignity, he shattered the mask Officer Briggs wore. And though the battle was far from over, hope sparked in Denise's chest for the first time since that terrifying night on the side of the road. A heavy silence fell over the courtroom, the kind that seemed to hum in people's ears. Judge Simmons leaned forward, studying Marcus intently. "Marcus," he asked gently, "do you remember what was on your mother's phone?" The little boy nodded, his chin trembling. "It was a video," he whispered, his small voice echoing through the room. "It showed everything when Officer Briggs came to Mommy's window, when he pulled her out of the car, when he put her face on the ground." A collective gasp rose from the benches behind him, where families, reporters, and lawyers sat riveted in disbelief. Officer Briggs sat stiffly at the witness stand, his jaw clenching so tightly a vein bulged near his temple. Sweat now trickled down his neck, darkening the collar of his uniform. The defense attorney, a young black woman named Tanya Harris, who until now had appeared resigned to inevitable defeat, suddenly came alive. She straightened, her eyes sharp and gleaming as she turned to the judge. "Your Honor," she said firmly, "I move to subpoena Officer Briggs' personal phone and request an emergency forensic analysis of Ms. Green's phone account. This child's testimony suggests deliberate destruction of evidence." Judge Simmons' eyes flicked toward Officer Briggs, whose breathing had grown rapid and shallow. The judge nodded gravely. "Granted," he said, his voice trembling with restrained outrage. A murmur spread through the courtroom like ripples on a dark lake. Denise Green felt her knees go weak as tears poured down her face. Her baby boy, her sweet, quiet Marcus, had torn down the walls built against them with nothing but his truth. As the bailiff led Marcus back to his seat, he clutched his Spider-Man backpack and looked up at his mother. Their eyes locked. In that single glance, Denise saw not just her son, but the reason she would keep fighting no matter how powerful their enemies seemed. The courtroom was still buzzing when the judge banged his gavel to adjourn for the day, but no one really moved. Everyone felt the shift in the air, the subtle, almost electric crackle of truth rising to the surface. Over the next 72 hours, the entire city watched with bated breath as forensic teams worked around the clock, digging into Denise Green's phone records. Early on the third morning, Tanya Harris arrived in court, clutching a thick folder, her expression fierce with determination. As she approached Denise at the defense table, she placed a reassuring hand on her shoulder and whispered, "We found it." When the judge resumed the session, Tanya rose, her voice steady but trembling with emotion. "Your Honor, the forensic team has recovered a cloud backup of Ms. Green's destroyed phone. The footage is intact." As the bailiff dimmed the lights, a giant monitor flickered to life at the front of the courtroom. What followed felt almost unreal. The entire room sat frozen as the video played. There was Denise, her face visible through her car window, eyes bueno and fearful. Officer Briggs could be seen approaching, his posture tense. He didn't greet her or ask for her license. Instead, he yanked open her door, grabbed her arm, and dragged her out onto the asphalt. Her screams echoed in the courtroom speakers raw and piercing. But they weren't the screams of aggression the prosecution had described. They were screams of pain. The video showed Officer Briggs pressing her face hard against the road, his knee pinning her back as he called her crazy and unstable. Then the footage shifted as he glanced around, reached into the car, and snatched Denise's phone off the passenger seat. Without hesitation, he smashed it under his boot before tossing it into the grass. Gasps filled the room, mingling with the quiet sobs of strangers who could barely watch. At the defense table, Denise sat shaking, tears streaming down her cheeks as Marcus reached out from the gallery, his little fingers curling around her trembling hand. For the first time since her arrest, she felt the suffocating grip of injustice begin to loosen. As the final frame of the video flickered into darkness, the courtroom sat in stunned silence. Even Judge Simmons rubbed his temples, visibly shaken. Officer Briggs slumped in his chair, his once confident posture reduced to a hollow shell of itself. Tanya Harris stood, her voice firm and echoing through the quiet. "Your Honor," she declared, "this footage does not just exonerate Ms. Green. It proves deliberate destruction of evidence and misconduct." Before the judge could respond, a commotion erupted near the courtroom doors. A young black woman in uniform, her badge glinting under the fluorescent lights, stepped forward briskly. "My name is Officer Renee Alvarez," she announced, her voice wavering at first. But then, gaining steel-like strength, she clutched a small flash drive in her trembling hand. "I work with Officer Briggs. I need to be heard." The judge gestured for her to approach. As she placed the flash drive on his bench, her eyes welled up. "For years, I watched reports of his misconduct disappear. Internal Affairs told us to delete complaints. They protected him because he made their numbers look good. But I couldn't stay silent anymore." A hush fell over the courtroom as she continued, tears spilling down her cheeks. "On this drive are internal memos, deleted reports, and complaint statements from community members, all suppressed to keep him in uniform." Tanya Harris gently placed a supportive hand on Renee's shoulder as murmurs rippled across the benches. Reporters scribbled furiously, jurors shifted with growing anger, and Denise Green sat frozen, feeling like the walls of oppression built around her were finally crumbling. Officer Briggs' face was ashen. Sweat trickled down his temples, and for the first time his eyes darted around the room in desperation. But there would be no escape. Truth, carried by a trembling boy and a brave young officer, had burst open the doors he thought his badge would forever keep locked. The revelation of Officer Alvarez's flash drive sent shockwaves beyond the courtroom. By the next morning, Denise Green's story had erupted across national news outlets. Outside the courthouse, protesters gathered holding signs that read, "Justice for Denise and no more lies." Inside, Tanya Harris moved swiftly, filing a civil lawsuit against the city for malicious prosecution and racial profiling. Denise sat quietly in the courtroom hallway. Marcus curled up asleep against her side, his Spider-Man backpack tucked under his head like a pillow. She brushed his curls back gently, feeling an unfamiliar sense of relief wash over her exhaustion. For months, she had felt invisible, her voice drowned out by those in power. But now she felt seen. Officer Briggs, once untouchable, was immediately suspended pending investigation. His confident stride was gone, replaced by a defeated slump, as he was escorted out of the courtroom in front of flashing cameras. Inside, Judge Simmons addressed the packed room with trembling hands. "This court has failed Ms. Green," he admitted, his voice heavy with shame. "I allowed a case to proceed without sufficient evidence. For that, I apologize to Ms. Green and her son, and to this community." As his words echoed through the silent room, Denise felt tears slip down her cheeks. They were tears not just of sadness or anger, but of something she thought she had lost forever: hope. Outside, the mayor issued a public statement calling for systemic reform, while multiple officers were placed under investigation. City officials hurried to draft policies requiring third-party backups for all body cam footage, hoping to salvage public trust. Watching the news from her small living room later that evening, Denise held Marcus close, feeling the warmth of his little body pressed against her side. For the first time in months, she could breathe deeply, knowing the truth they carried had changed not just their lives, but the lives of countless others who would come after them. A year later, the city gathered for a televised community forum addressing police reform, youth protection, and civil rights. In the crowded auditorium, under bright stage lights, stood Marcus Green. Now 7 years old, he was taller, his hair neatly combed, wearing a crisp navy suit with a red tie that hung slightly crooked. His small hands clutched the edges of the podium as he gazed out at the sea of faces, city leaders, activists, families, and officers sitting stiffly in uniformed rows. He took a shaky breath, feeling the microphone's cold metal against his lips. His mother, Denise, sat in the front row, tears already welling in her eyes, her hand pressed to her chest as if to hold her heart steady. "You told me I was too small to know the truth," Marcus said, his young voice echoing with quiet strength. "But truth is not about size. It's about what's right." His words hung in the air like a hymn filling every silent corner of the hall. People shifted in their seats, wiping away tears, as murmurs of agreement rippled through the crowd. In the back row, Officer Renee Alvarez watched with tears streaming down her cheeks. Now promoted to community liaison, she felt pride swell in her chest as she watched the boy who a year ago had shattered a fortress of lies with nothing but his trembling honesty. Reporters scribbled furiously, cameras flashed, and the mayor himself stood to applaud. As Marcus stepped down from the podium, thunderous applause erupted. Denise rose to meet him, folding him into her arms as his face pressed against her shoulder, his small body shaking with relief and quiet pride. In that moment, the world saw not just a child, but a young man whose courage had reminded them all that when truth speaks, no matter how small the voice, it echoes forever. The ripples from Marcus' testimony spread far beyond Cleveland's courthouse steps. In the months that followed, his powerful words at the City Forum news stations across the nation replayed his speech, calling him the boy with the voice that changed justice. Schools invited Denise and Marcus to speak to their students about courage and truth. Denise, once just a silent figure in the courtroom, stood before crowded assemblies sharing her journey with quiet grace, always ending by looking at her son and saying, "But it was Marcus who saved me. He taught me that silence only protects the guilty." Their story inspired a new state law, Marcus Law, mandating the preservation of all evidence collected by minors in police encounters and requiring third-party cloud backups for officer body cams and civilian phone recordings. Activists rallied behind it, lawmakers signed it, and for the first time in years, Denise felt her pain transform into purpose. Each morning as she sipped coffee at their small kitchen table, watching Marcus scribble math problems in his workbook, she marveled at how her little boy with his quiet strength had brought down walls of systemic oppression that generations before them could only chip at. Officer Renee Alvarez continued her work as community liaison, leading new youth witness protection programs under the Marcus Speaks Foundation, named in his honor. She often visited their home, sitting on the porch with Denise, as they watched Marcus race around the yard, laughter ringing through the air like the purest freedom. And sometimes when the sky turned orange at dusk and the world felt still, Denise closed her eyes and whispered a silent prayer of gratitude for the truth that once nearly broke them, but instead set them free. One quiet evening, as the sun dipped behind the maple trees lining their narrow street, Denise sat beside Marcus on the worn porch steps. He rested his head against her arm, exhausted after a long day of school and baseball practice. She gently smoothed his curls back, feeling the steady beat of his breath against her side. "Mom," he murmured, his eyelids fluttering. "Do you think people will remember what I said?" Denise swallowed the lump in her throat and kissed his forehead softly. "They already do, baby," she whispered. "They already do." In that golden hush, she realized something powerful. Truth does not need an army. It does not need loud voices or powerful titles. Sometimes it simply needs one brave soul willing to speak when everyone else is silent. That is the life lesson Marcus left for the world, that courage has no age limit and integrity has no expiration date. To everyone listening today, never underestimate your voice, no matter how small it seems. Truth spoken with courage echoes far beyond the moment it's uttered. If this story moved your heart, please share your thoughts in the comments below. We read every single one. Don't forget to subscribe and hit the notification bell so you never miss another true story that reminds us when we stand for what's right. No matter how dark the room, our light will always find its way through.